Please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is just a notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. Move right into our consent agenda tonight. I have a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $6,000 from the Feinstein Foundation with the allocations divided pursuant to the school committee memo dated February 11, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,500 from Brian Legg to the AHS baseball program.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $3,000 from the Attleboro Rotary to the Model United Nations Club at the Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,500 from the YMCA to the AHS Gifts donation line.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $84 from Marari's Inc., Game 7 Sports Bar and Grill to the AHS softball account.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $509.70 from Alex and Ani Charity by Design to the Best Buddies International at Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation of a Bluetooth portable speaker with an estimated value of $125 to Willett Elementary School from the Saravo family.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept 2 cases of paper from an anonymous donor to the Hyman Fine Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve a field trip proposal for 20 Attleboro High School students, grade 9 to 12, to attend National High School Cheerleading Championship in Orlando, Florida, from March 24th, 2016 through March 27th, 2016. Personal and fundraising is the funding source.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to approval of our minutes. We've circulated minutes from the meetings of December 7th, 2015, December 14th, 2015, December 16th, 2015, December 21st, 2015, January 5th, 2016, and January 11th, 2016. I have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
New members should abstain for the approving the minutes prior to inauguration. Or does it
According to
matter?
legal counsel, doesn't matter. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now move on to the business agenda. Item 1 is a little bit outdated since our last meeting was snowed out, but I did want to just recap and update the committee on the discussion we had regarding the use of Coelho Middle School as a polling place for Ward 1. As you're aware, or may be aware, the Election Commission had suggested the use of St. Teresa's in South Attleboro as the polling place in Ward 1. The city council, or some city council members, had expressed some reservations about that and wanted to use Coelho again as they had in last year, November's election. On behalf of the committee, at the request of Councilman DeLisio, I appeared before a committee, city council meeting and explained that we did have concerns regarding using Coelho in March after discussions with the administration based on believed increased turnout for the election in March and even more so in November, and the fact that we would not be able to close the school in time, most likely for March election. And so I did tell them that I couldn't guarantee that we would approve the use of Coelho for the March election, and they did vote to use St. Teresa's for the March and November of this year. I did express to them that if it was the city's desire to use schools as a polling place going forward, that we would certainly be willing to discuss that possibility, but that there are a lot of things that go into that, such as, if we're going to close schools that for the day, that necessitates discussing contractual issues as well. And there are a lot of things we would need to consider, but that if they wanted that to happen, they would need to give us adequate notice in order so we could have the proper discussions. And that's essentially, the message I gave them that night. Anybody have any questions or comments? Thanks. The next item on the agenda is the overview of facilities annual maintenance program. So if we could have Mr. Parento join us, and Mr. Furtado, do you want to join us as well?
I apologize for not getting this sooner.
It's okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You want to sit there?
So, the chairman felt that it would be helpful to give you sort of an overview. This is kind of a Cliff Notes overview of building conditions currently. This is something that has passed before the Facilities Committee and the last school committee, as well as, I believe, the full committee at the last school committee. However, there was some folks on the committee today who weren't there for that. And it's helpful, especially in the midst of heating season and winter, and with the upcoming summer, which is a time when we really try to, gain some ground on some of the issues. For the whole committee to have a good overview on what the building conditions are. So Jason's going to go through building by building very quickly. Again, it's sort of Cliff Notes. If you have any specific questions or want to go deeper into any of the issues, we can do it now, or feel free to call me.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, this is really just a snapshot as, basically where we are from a facility standpoint, and really to sort of make everyone aware of some of the things that you're going to be hearing about as we move through 2016 into 2017 moving forward. So some of the things, as Mark said, we've talked a lot about. Some things are just sort of underlying operational day-to-day things that have an impact but aren't necessarily seen by everybody, but still are going to impact our budget and things that this committee, I'm sure, will be talking about. So with that, I'm going to start with Brennan. I'm certainly not going to go through the entire document. Mark and I kind of joked about needing 10 minutes per school, but that's 90 minutes, so we're gonna move a little more quickly than that. So Brennan Middle School, originally built in 1997, 106,000 square feet, so a really good-sized building. 30 classrooms, athletic fields, grounds, etc. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. Some of the most recent work performed there, and I'm sort of jumping over the summary that's there. If you have any questions as we're going through, as Mark said, feel free to kind of ask them as we go. But there are a couple of things that really jump out. Most recently, we've done some concrete repairs there with help from the city. That was a project approved through the capital improvements plan. We've also done some variable frequency drives, really in an effort to save energy, improve the day-to-day operation of our HVAC systems. And we just this year actually just finished that, right, Mark?
Yep.
Just finished putting in a new head end on our new energy management system. So we were having some problems communicating. We would tell room 103 to be at 69 degrees, and it would be at 79 degrees. So we've been able to get that upgraded through some grant funding through National Grid and some funding through our operational budget. Challenges at Brennan are probably obvious, and we've had a lot of these conversations. Keeping the building dry continues to be a challenge for us. Waterproofing, the metal, they're identified as aluminum walls. They don't act, they don't walk and talk and respond like aluminum walls, aluminum siding, but that's what they're identified in our plans. But as you can see, they're beginning to deteriorate, and they take on a significant amount of water depending on the type of moisture that we've got. Snow load on the roof, with a little bit of rain following that, we leak. Heavy rain coming in a northerly direction, we leak. Rain straight up and down, an inch an hour, almost no penetration into the building. So it's interesting in the way that it's getting into the building, but also obvious upon further inspection. That, I think, is our primary challenge as we move into 2016, is how do we not only keep the building waterproof, keep it dry, until we find a more permanent solution, but how do we handle the things that continue to get wet? So if you walk into the building, you're going to see areas of the building where we move the fire alarm panel from the vestibule when you first walk in to the interior of the building, because that had been leaking so much. That was probably done in 2006. Those leaks have now moved inward. And you'll see that we're trying to protect the new location of the fire alarm panel. So waterproofing those walls, the window details, that look really beautiful and provide a great amount of natural lighting, but are really causing us some water issues in the building. I think that's our primary challenge. The overall age of the facility, as we approach 20 years, there's everything that goes along with that. From floor work to addressing some long-standing flooring issues that were sort of a result of some construction issues and some other plumbing issues. Mark, did I miss anything? Or?
No, I think that's,
Okay.
Jason, you mentioned that it's been on the capital improvements list for a few years.
It has been.
What is
for
it,
several years.
what tier is it, or what code has it been given by the city?
We've got it year.
it's urgent.
Yeah,
Urgent.
year one urgent.
We, when we did the roof here,
Mm-hmm.
we had the, you know, the very good fortune of the project manager and the roof specialist, the architect who designed our roof system, offered to take a look at the buildings pro bono, and provided a very comprehensive overview as to what they thought were the problems and the costs, and that's what our numbers are based on. So that was, you know, 5 years ago for that, and there were certainly significant problems prior to that. So it's been on the capital plan for as long as I've been here, so it's, you know, 9 years.
Okay. Mr. Geddes?
And I noticed their sister school, so the same issues are listed.
You know,
with
actually,
alongside.
that's probably one of the ways we're going to save a little bit of time as we talk about Brendan on one side, I know Robertson, Hyman 5, almost the identical conversation.
And I noticed on both of them, well, have they both been tier 1 urgent for as long as you've been here? Okay. Thank you.
And you're talking about Wamsutta, its sister school.
Wamsutta
Yeah,
and Brennan,
Right.
to make sure that they're both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
So, seeing that this, you know, almost a decade for some of these capital improvement projects, it's common for, you know, all the schools we have. I've already seen 3 or 4, and I know there'll probably be more. What is the normal turnaround time on projects of this nature? I mean, if they've been on the capital improvements list for a decade, what is the turnaround time on these kind of projects? I mean, because these are not like kind of projects that you can just keep on pushing off. Sooner or later, it's just going to cause more damage, which is going to cost more money. So I want to understand, what is the average turnaround time on projects of this nature?
You know, I don't know if I could give an accurate answer to that. I think I see that some things are addressed relatively quickly. Other things take a little bit longer. I know I'm sure that scope has something to do with that. I really couldn't answer that with any level of accuracy based on my experience here the last 15 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Coelho Middle School. Originally built in 1955, had a significant renovation, which I was lucky enough to sort of get to see. We weren't part of the project, but to get to see it from a distance was really interesting to see that building go from 1955 to 2004. A great facility overall. We do struggle with some issues. The roofing there tends to be problematic over the older section of the building. So again, there are portions of that building that were still original 1955 based on their building envelope. In those areas of the building, we do have some leaking and some challenging there. Also, the type of roof that was installed is not a long-term roof. It's an EPDM roof ballasted with stones on top of it. That's probably a 15-year roof at best. So even though Coelho is one of our newest buildings, we're looking at significantly addressing that roof as we move forward. So the warranty on it was 10 years. But we haven't had any significant problems. We do have a few issues that we've been able to manage as we move along. It's just something we want to keep in mind. From time to time, it comes up.
Yeah, and again, for context, the roof on this building is warranted for 30.
This building, meaning the high school.
Why was a roof put on with a 15-year lifespan? Do we know? I mean, obviously it was before we were making...
I'm not sure. Those were, at the time, very good roofs. EPDM roofs, rubber roofing on flat roof surfaces are proven good, strong, solid roofs. They just don't, hold up as well as modern roofing PVC systems.
Okay.
Certainly better than rolled asphalt roofing. I think they were a better option at the time, which was kind of the other prevalent material used in 2003. Thank you. It is important to note about Coelho that we do have some challenges with the concrete and some ground level water. So if you go through Coelho, you're going to notice some areas, the cafeteria, some of the closets, even a couple of classrooms where the tile doesn't look as though it's holding as well as it should be, and it's not. And some of that has to do with some challenges that we've had with the concrete. Some of that has to do with groundwater, and specifically over by the gymnasium in that area. So we're looking at some solutions for that, finding the right flooring to sort of match up with the existing concrete. And in some cases, we're looking at potentially having to put in some subfloors. So that's why flooring's on this list, which normally VCT, I mean, we've got original VCT here at the high school from 1962, so. Hill Roberts, originally constructed in 1975, no major renovation. 76,000 square feet. We've actually done quite a bit of work there. A brand new roofing system, PVC roof. The success of this roof here at the high school was really the model for us as we started to continue to work with the MSBA and the city to replace roofs around the district. So we put a PVC roof on there, again, a great warranty. That is performing really well. We do have some of the challenges of a building that age. The boilers are sort of going down there through their second and third round of retubing. So we've got to seriously consider addressing the boilers in both Hill Roberts and Hyman Fine. Rooftop AC units, interestingly enough, while we were putting the roof on Hyman Fine, one of the rooftop units failed and required us to replace it sort of right after they had put the new roof on. That was a good time, by the way. Bringing up this huge unit on the roof on a brand new PVC roof surface. That kept us up, but so again, that's another big ticket item. At Hill Roberts, it's $360,000 to replace those units. We've done one at Hyman Fine already, so that's a little bit less at $300,000. But boilers, air conditioning are something we really need to keep in mind as we move through with Hill Roberts and Hyman Fine. Of course, being an open classroom, there's a lot of other things that come up as part of that conversation as well. So we're seriously looking at, and this is now on our capital improvements list, and we've already done the design for adding some walls in the building to sort of tighten up between the entrance of the building and as you enter the actual educational space.
Mr. Quinn?
Of the 9 buildings, how many of them have air conditioning units?
We've got a level of air conditioning in every building, even Willett, but only in the administrative space.
Okay.
So Willett has no air-conditioned space in the educational areas. And Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts are fully air-conditioned. Brennan and Wamsutter are fully air-conditioned. Studley is partial air conditioning. Thatcher is partial air conditioning. Coelho is fully air-conditioned. And I think I've touched on all of them if I haven't missed one there. But
High schools and
high school is resource center, and that's it. And I can't even say that for sure as we move into the spring, frankly.
having worked in schools that had air conditioning, about how frequently is it used? How many months out of the year? Into October and then early spring, or?
You know, as we get into September, it's great because outside air normally does the job. So
Yeah.
we're very conservative with set points.
Yeah.
First of all, making sure that we're respecting any contractual obligations to maintaining building temperature.
Okay.
And what's recommended by the Department of Education, but also doing everything that we can to conserve energy. So whenever there's opportunity for us to pull in more outside air overnight to keep the buildings cooler before the day begins, we do that. We're not often running air conditioning in October. Every once in a while, as we get into late September, somebody might be a little bit warm, we turn on the air conditioning. But for the most part, we're June through early mid-September, and then sporadically after that.
And are the buildings being utilized during the summer where that would be necessary to air condition the whole building? Is there a lot of summer school programs at these schools, or?
We always modify based on usage.
Okay.
And of course, take a building like Wamsutter, for instance, that doesn't get a lot of summer school use at the time. We're keeping those temperatures, we're minimally treating that air, but we don't want to just pull in all outside air because then we're going to have issues with climate and mold and everything else. So we're minimally addressing that based on ASHRA recommendations, but we modify, how we cool the buildings based on usage throughout the summer. Really throughout the entire school year when we're on school break, except this last freeze up that we had a couple of weekends ago. We usually run unoccupied to save energy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. Hyman Fine is really the same conversation as Hill Roberts. What's interesting is last year, last spring, we had to retube boiler number 1 at Hill Roberts. We just finished retubing boiler number 2 Hyman Fine. So we continue that cycle of significant boiler repairs at Hill Roberts and Hyman Fine. And, we'll face some air conditioning challenges as we move into the spring in both buildings, as those units begin to deteriorate in performance.
Mr. Storrs?
The acoustical tiles, is that because those are the open classroom environments? Is that why they have the acoustical tiles?
Let's see.
Under the capital improvements, the...
That is referencing the cementitious wood fiber, so that is not prominent in all of the educational space, but in some of it. This plan, which came off of our 5-year capital asset plan, where we had engineers come in and look at the entire district, was identified as adding those to improve insulation, increase your R value in the building, and at the same time improve the learning environment. The ceiling tiles that we have, resource center, cafeteria, some of the common spaces that Tectum, cementitious wood fiber, which is in need of replacement because those buildings had leaked for so long before we had the roof replacement that they're all stained. So while they're holding up, they look terrible, and that water does eventually start to sort of impact their performance.
Now, has a study ever been performed or looked at to possibly enclose the classroom spaces?
Not I wouldn't say a thorough study, but we've had several conversations. It's rare that, we don't look at a way of sort of really optimizing that environment for educational needs. There's no doubt, I certainly could speak to it as well as any of your educators, but I would imagine it creates some challenges. Studley Elementary School. Again, some great stuff happening in Studley. We originally built in 1965. We had a renovation in the early 90s, I think it was 1991. Brand new PVC roof went on simultaneously. We did Hill Roberts, Hyman Fine, and Studley at the same time. A year and a half later, we went ahead and replaced all the skylights. So from a roofing perspective, we are in a very good place. We actually had a bit of a scare just a couple of months ago. The rooftop unit had a leak in the ductwork. We thought it was the roof. We had the roofers back. Everybody's analyzing it. We're talking about doing an infrared scan when the spring comes. We had blown a hole through our ductwork. It had nothing to do with the roof, in fact. So we're actually in a really good place there. Of course, we've done the usual lighting upgrades. And here we put in a new boiler system. And we actually did something, I think, a little bit ahead of its time. Mark spearheaded this. If you want to talk about that, Mark, sort of the hybrid system that we put in.
Sure. We there's a new boiler technology that at the time was extremely new and a little pricey, and both boilers in Studley had kind of gone in a bad way. So what we did is when we put the proposal request out, we asked vendors to offer an option that, in their opinion, was an efficient way to deal with the problem. So we had the vendors could either subscribe to the old technology, the new technology, or some idea that we hadn't thought of. And we had a vendor do that in a very effective way. And so we installed a brand new high-efficiency stainless steel boiler, which has just been remarkable. And rather than back it up with another very expensive high-efficiency stainless steel boiler, we backed it up with, sort of the Chevy of all boilers that's been around forever and never breaks.
Right.
So we have a very reliable, although very inefficient, backup system when needed, which is very rarely, and a very high-end, boiler driving the business most of the time. It's a pretty neat system.
And 90% of the time, 95% of the time, we're running at 93%, 93 to 95% efficiency with that primary boiler. The secondary backup is only around 80%, 82%, but we almost never run it. And I think the only time we've run it this year was this past week, when we were just trying to keep up. So rarely does that ever run. As far as projects that are out there, of course, Mr. Storrs had just mentioned some of the ceiling tile issues. Now at Studley, the entire ceiling is cementitious wood fiber for soundproofing. Not because it's an open classroom. I think at the time it was just what they were installing from a soundproofing perspective. That is all stained from previous roof leaks. So that will need to be addressed. I think the thing that jumps out at us, and Mark and I will be having more conversations about it, is the building's facade as you enter. That needs a significant amount of work. I think large sections of it will need to be replaced, even if you look at the building where the Studley sign actually is, and then underneath that will need a significant amount of repair and paint. So I think that's probably the big one for us at Studley right now. Peter Thatcher Elementary School. Great building. We've had a lot of positive response to maintaining it. I'm not sure if response is the right way to term it, but from a maintenance standpoint, it hasn't presented as many challenges as some of the other newer construction in the district. At the same time, it does have its challenges. 132,000 square feet, so there's a lot of open space. Allows us to be conservative in the way we manage HVAC. It's partially air conditioned. Some of the things that are unique to Thatcher is that it was originally built in 1951 with a renovation in the mid-90s. I think it opened in 1999. The original portion of the building once had this beautiful green glazed block walls, which I'm sure at the time were very stylish, and I think are probably back in style at this point. But we painted over those when we remodeled the building, so it was repainted during construction, and that paint has not held. So as you're walking through Thatcher and you walk into the main entrance, and you're going to see there's some issues, some other things, but you walk through, everything looks great and neat and clean and bright, and then you kind of take a right and head toward the resource center. There's chunks of paint missing off the wall. You look behind it, it's this beautiful glazed block. Addressing that is going to is going to be expensive. And it's something that Mark and I have been looking at doing in sort of a phased-in approach, because it goes all the way down that hallway, takes a left down those other hallways, and there's also some other spaces in the basement. So if you ever go through there and you're like, boy, what is going on? These guys can't slap a coat of paint on this. It's actually trying to get something to stick to that old block. And we've tried a few times. So what it looks like is stripping that off, treating that original block, and then reapplying something. If we could strip it off and keep it clean, we would have just stripped it off and gone with the green. But no such luck there. Roofing at Thatcher again, some challenges there. That was an interesting installation. I would imagine during the time, and I don't have any first-hand experience, but I think temperature might have been an issue when that roof went on. It's a rolled asphalt roof. Generally a pretty good roof. It's relatively common. It's not something you see a lot on flat roofs, but it's common enough, I suppose. But we've got some significant challenges with roofing there. So this past spring, summer, we did an infrared roof scan, and we're able to identify some of the areas in which water was penetrating into the building. So whether it be from a phased-in approach, and we have added this to the capital improvements list, I think it's been on for 2 years now, we're going to be taking a very close look at doing some significant re-roofing at Peter Thatcher. Wamsutta, we've sort of had this conversation. This leaks in some other areas. Here we've gotten a little bit creative. It's funny at Wamsutta, the gym is sort of a predominant area where we get leaks. At Brennan, it's more to the front of the building, but still leaks in all the same areas. We've done a few things this year. We've replaced a lot of the gutters. We've done some roof repairs before school opened, all in an effort to try to keep water from penetrating into the building while not throwing good money after bad and spending money on a roof system that eventually is going to have to be replaced. So sort of an interesting balancing act. We've had limited success or varying amounts of success in some areas. At the front of the building, we've been very successful. We've had some success in the gym area, some success in the music room area. So some things that we'll keep going after. I know Mark and I are going to probably be having a lot of conversations as we move into the summer about how we're going to address these long term. Also, it's important to keep in mind, Brennan and Wamsutta, it's funny because they've got the same challenges, but not at the same time. So we've already replaced the cooling tower at Brennan for the air conditioning. Wamsutta's is holding up. It's going to need to be replaced within the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years. Maybe sooner than that, but we'll say 3 years to be safe. Wamsutta's is fine. Brennan has had no issues with the hot water tank or the hot water system. Wamsutta has. So the hot water boiler has actually failed, and we're looking at having to replace that. So one of the challenges that we're having is, as we move into the spring when we don't need heat, we'll need to run one of those boilers to provide hot water, which is obviously going to drive energy costs a little bit. So we're going to try to get ahead of that, but there's a significant cost with replacing that. Willett Elementary School. I would imagine across the board, probably our least challenging building from a facility standpoint. Not to say that it doesn't have its challenges. Originally constructed in 1941 with a significant renovation in the mid-90s. 76,000 square feet, so very much in concert with your elementary schools, except Thatcher, which was originally a middle school, which probably accounts for the scope and the size of that facility. We've got, I think the one that sort of jumps out at you when you talk about Willett is the lack of air conditioning. And you can feel it, you know it when you get into the building. We try to be as creative as we can by bringing in outside air when we can, but one of the things that I know that Ken made sure gained the priority as soon as he came on was adding air conditioning to the resource center so that we could at least have one space where students could gather and be in a relatively comfortable area. We've installed fans, we've got shades and other areas to keep direct sunlight out. We've looked at several other options, everything from adding window air conditioning units to fully air conditioning the entire building, which brings you up to, the number that we got at the time was over $800,000 to do that. So, depending on how we approach it, a significant cost. Certainly, just some of the other things that go along with the age of the building, we're at that 20-year mark on the roof. So it's something we need to keep in mind. We're not having issues with roof leaks, but on a windy day we'll lose a couple of shingles, and there are some things that we've got to make sure that we're keeping an eye on. Exterior window work, some window trim, and a little bit of work on the facade as well.
Where are we in the process of addressing the AC issue there as far as the resource center or whatever we decide to do? Is it something that it's anticipated will be done before the summer or not?
No, it's part of our capital improvement request. It was recommended by the municipal council to be addressed, but that we haven't gotten any word that that's going to be considered this year.
'Cause I know, I think a lot of us heard about it, and I know, including from members of the municipal council as wanting it to be a priority. But you're saying you haven't heard that it's going to go through this year.
No, I actually followed up with a member of the council who was sort of, actively trying to support the installation at Willett. And the process is that the municipal council is able to make recommendations to the mayor's office in terms of what the proposals citywide should be considered, but the ultimate decision does not rest with the council. So. Okay.
Any questions on Willett or anything specific? Okay. Special use buildings, that's a phrase coined by Mark. That's Old High School, Briggs, and Finberg. Really, this is just sort of a snapshot. Briggs Corner, having been renovated in the very early 90s, is holding up pretty well. It doesn't have the modern amenities that you'd like in a modern education facility, but it's certainly holding up well. We did replace the roof in 2003, so I think overall Briggs Corner is holding up pretty well. The portable building, is another topic. It's performing much better than the portable at Finberg, but that is going to be an issue at some point. Heating and cooling that building is becoming more and more challenging, and the cost of replacing that rooftop unit floats around that $30,000 to $40,000 mark. So it's probably something we'll have to consider as we move forward and consider the use of that facility. Finberg, in many ways, the same thing. About 15 years ago, a portion of that roof was replaced. It's actually holding up really well. The interior of the building received a lot of paint and just some minor repairs at the time. Window systems there are probably our largest challenge. And of course, we don't have any of the ADA access that we'd like to have in a building that size. Old high school kind of falls right in line with that. We've got significant problems, I would say more than we have at Finberg, with the window system. And again, the ADA issues. There are so many levels at the old high school. You can't walk in any door without going at least up one stairwell or down one stairwell. It's incredible. So it creates some challenges.
Mr. Geddes?
Of all of the major capital improvements that are needed across the district, what would you say are the absolute highest priority?
For me, I always look at, and I would imagine that you may get different answers from different folks. An educator would probably have a different answer than I do. But, for me, I think building envelope issues are where it all starts. And I think Brendan and Wamsutta are where I would really, focus my energies in just getting those buildings watertight. Because while there have been some challenges, and we've had some issues really since they've opened, whether it be some of the issues with the sprinkler or just some building systems that didn't work the way that we expected they would. We're just always going to be in a place where we're chasing after it if we don't get these buildings dry. Everything else we're able to sort of manage and repair as it comes along. But if we don't waterproof those buildings and address what are becoming systemic issues, and we're going to have problems.
Yeah, the building envelope issues grow with time. So, and you're not even necessarily aware of it. The water damage that's being caused by penetration, some of it you can see, some of it you can't. That you can't see, comes down and bites you later. And, those things grow quickly and in a very perverse way. And, again, I remember before we did the roof here, the kind of scene in this building where we had, tarps channeling water into buckets and garbage pails and rusted lockers and the whole thing. That's simply not an educational environment, and you need to secure that first before you can start getting the other stuff addressed.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
I just want to say, as we were talking about kind of the challenges of these buildings, I do want to comment, having been in the buildings, that they're really well maintained, they're clean, they're good learning environments. So I do think as well, some of this news is, presents a lot of challenges. The day-to-day stuff that most of the students see is really quite positive, and I want to just give you and your team a hand for all the effort that you do to make the best of whatever facility, whether it's brand new or 60 years old. So
Thank you very much. You really have a great team. Your maintenance team is tremendous. Your custodial staff, day and evening custodial staffs are really committed. One of the interesting things, especially in the custodial world, is it seems to be one of those things where there seems to be a lot of turnover. You don't have that here. People come to Attleboro, they want to work here, they're invested, they're committed, and it shows. And I think that's in every department. So thank you very much, and I'll be sure to share that.
Did you want to talk at all about the high school project? Is it?
We certainly can, yeah. And you notice the high school is absent in the report. High school is in a process now of being considered for renovation. We are at the tail end of doing a project manager evaluation, as a matter of fact. We're interviewing 3 finalists on Wednesday night, from which we expect to have a chosen project manager on board. Then the step after that will be to get a design firm to come in, talk a lot with us, inspect the building and that kind of thing, and start putting together a vision for what we need from an educational perspective, what's doable from a physical perspective, in terms of a building renovation, and that will be brought back to the city and the MSBA for kind of review and approval as a process going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Parento or Mr. Furtado? Mr. Zoe?
I just had one to make sure I'm envisioning this properly. By open classroom, is that, like, for example, I want to say it was Brennan that used to have, like, the walls that open? Is that what you mean, like, they're open to each other?
You know,
Or-
even more open than that.
Like, they're just completely open, or?
Yeah.
No walls. I wish that's what it was.
Picture the gym with
Yep.
just some bookcases and some cabinets
All right.
delineating space.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Mr. Larson?
To Mr. Stowe's point, there's quite a bit of classroom over in B building that I'm sure you've been in, and that is now separated into 4 separate classrooms. There was a time when the only thing that separated those 4 rooms were half walls and bookcases.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, I mean, it was prevalent here, it was definitely prevalent at Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts, and problem is when you go put walls up, heating systems, the thermostat can be in one room and the heating system can be in the other room.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Mr. Parento. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Furtado, you're staying put.
I am.
Ms. Nelson, do you have the,
Yeah.
move on to the next item of the agenda, which is a budget update on where we are in the process with the new governor's numbers that have been released by the governor as far as foundation funding for the school districts, including Attleboro. Just a quick recap. We discussed in December, our initial priorities from the administration as to what the priorities were for the upcoming year's budget. We have tried to make talking about this on a more extended basis a priority in order to tone down the rhetoric, so to speak, so that we can have more thoughtful discussions amongst ourselves, with the public and with the municipal government, and to avoid the kind of last 1 to 2 month budget crisis that seems to happen every year, excuse me. For reasons that we'll get to in a minute. We may have failed in that regard, but to know not of our own doing, but we at least have had the discussions and hopefully can continue to have thoughtful discussions on how to move forward. So with that being said, Mr. Furtado, if you want to just explain this slide for me, for the committee.
The numbers have been moving as the year has gone on, so it may not necessarily be familiar, but the FY16 budget is currently at $69,261,000. That is with a recent receipt in the last couple of weeks of $103,000 for 2 teachers that we hired at the beginning of the year due to class size issues, as well as earlier funding for the newly started CTE program in public safety. That second bar takes the governor's budget, the proposed net school spending numbers, includes all of the things that have been added to the budget this year, sort of keeping our fingers crossed, and puts us at a projected FY17 budget of approximately $69,649,000, an increase of about $400,000, which is about 0.5%. Again, just for context for the committee, the health insurance increase for FY17 has been fixed, and it's at 4.5%, and will cost our district $502,000. So the increase, based on the governor's budget proposal, won't even cover the cost of the health insurance increase for the district. The third column represents the funding that would have been required for the district to remain at essentially level services, which means nothing new, just operating as we are now, and fulfilling our contractual obligations for FY17. And then finally, the third column, the fourth column is the FY17 budget proposal brought forth in December, showing some additional needs being met, particularly with respect to class size issues, services provided to our special needs students, and some administrative positions that have universally been recognized as necessary for the operation of this $70 million enterprise.
So a few points on this slide. First, that second number, which takes the governor's proposal, is not a set number. Representative Haro today did reach out to say, that number's not final. That, I've reached out to him. Other school committees have reached out to their representatives to say that what the governor's proposed is insufficient. So that number, could move, but I think realistically speaking, nobody expects it to move much from what the state will be giving. So that's one. Two. On that last slide, which was our preliminary budget proposal or number that we put forth in our priorities, it's important to note that that's not it's not a utopia scenario of if we could get everything we want. That is what we think we need in order to provide the students of Attleboro what they need for a quality education. That is
not a wish list.
No, that is replacing teachers that have been laid off over the past several years, positions that have been unfilled for too long, and continuing to upgrade our technology to bring us in line with the 21st century. So that fourth column there is really where we had decided in December was the minimum we needed to be.
Correct.
This slide here, Mr. Furtado, you can explain in more detail, but essentially what it shows is what makes up the level services budget, what the increases are over 2016. So
Right. That $4 million that you saw, which was between where we're going to be funded and where we need to be funded, the green areas are showing you the contribution for each of the aspects on the bottom of the graph toward that $4 million to get us to level services. So, we have salary increases of $3 million, contractual salary increases. We have, as I explained, the health insurance increase of $500,000. Other city services at about $60,000. The facilities contractors at EXO at about $60,000, and then a bunch of other things. So you can see that $300,000 or $400,000 increase in our budget is not going to get us very far in terms of what our contractual obligations are.
And then the next slide just kind of illustrates it another way that, the increase is not, or the level services budget is not going to any new programs, any new initiatives. The majority of it are contractual increases of our teachers and our other employees. I think, increases that we've acknowledged have been smaller than a lot of other municipal departments, which is important to remember looking at that chart, So, the fourth slide, the fourth chart we saw a few back showed what our 2017 budget priorities number was, which was an increase of about $6 million. We talked in December about this, and as you'll recall, there were really two priorities that the administration put forth. The first overwhelming priority was staffing. The second was technology. From staffing, it's a three-pronged staffing problem. Again, primarily your rank and file educators. We have lost staff over the last several years, and we have not filled positions we need to.
And we have, again, district-wide problems with class size.
Right. And we've talked about that on several occasions, that our class sizes are too high, and losing more teachers at this point just doesn't seem to be an option. And then we have district support specialists and special ed personnel that we need. Any failing to fill those roles just results. You know, it's a.
We won't be fulfilling our obligations, to those students.
And as we've talked about on numerous occasions, administrators, our administration is woefully understaffed. We essentially run the district with the top level of administration of 4 people, which is unacceptable going forward, and it's really not a sustainable situation. I think it's a credit to the administration we have that we've been as successful as we have been, but it's something we need to get fixed. Mr. Quinn?
Mr. Sawyer, Mr. Sheehan, can you speak a little bit to the types of reductions that we've had in staff, particularly what it might have used to look like, at the high school level versus what it looks like now, in terms of positions or anything along those lines, specific things that students would have had access to, 3, 4, 5 years ago that are no longer available?
Well, a while ago, 6, 7 years ago, in fact, there was a different priority within the district, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular. The bottom line is that our middle schools used to have guidance counselors in them, and to have middle schools without guidance counselors is ludicrous. But they also used to have remedial reading teachers in the schools, and there are no longer any remedial reading teachers either. I mean, to say that today sounds ludicrous. The middle schools also had a world language program, or a foreign language program, in order to feed students to the high school and appropriate choose a program going into the high school. But then, as we look forward, Dave and I and Mark participates, et cetera, every Friday, we look at what are the priorities within the district, and even last week, it was a situation where what do we need to offer our CTE program? What is current? What should we be looking at? What should we be developing? We shouldn't be cutting CTE programs unless they're archaic and they don't fit what is current for job skill markets. And when you're out there looking to cut $4 to $5 million, it's difficult to say what programs you're going to bring in anew. I really want to make it clear that that is not the posture that I would take. You have to still have the district progress educationally in what you're offering children and what you want the skills to be for those children who are walking across the stage as seniors. So consequently, these are tough decisions by administration and school committee by which to look at every single program, analyze every program, evaluate every program, but still make sure that you are moving forward in skill development with regard to the students, and the least of which is, in fact, making sure that the technology that the children are leaving, the skill level that they're leaving with, in fact, is those children are able to compete at the next level, whether it's in the military or a 2-year college or a technical school or a 4-year college or university. Dave?
In the last few years, the cuts that we have made have been generally in just the rank and file classroom teachers. We have not cut programs. We've tried very hard to maintain programs as best we can. We do not want the decisions we make to have an impact on the quality of the education the kids get, but in terms of limiting their choices. But the effect of that is that our class sizes across the district have gone up. And that the number of people in various roles the number of kids that they're serving has gone up. And so in all those cases, the increased workload, has an impact on everyone's ability to meet the challenges of the varied needs that we face every day. I think that's been the real impact in the last couple of years.
And just even getting to know each, not just the workload, but getting to know each child and knowing their individual needs and picking each child.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a lot to say about this, so I'll try to pace myself throughout the presentation. To Mr. Sawyer's point, I did a little bit of research in terms of student to teacher ratio. In 2014, so before the cuts of the last couple of years, Attleboro was at 15.2 students per teacher. State average at the time was 13.3. Looking at our DART schools, looking at the neighboring districts, The only one higher than us was North Attleboro. They were at 16. The only other one above 13, above 14, excuse me, was Methuen at 14.7. Our DART averages, and of the districts that I looked at, they're all below 13. And when I actually looked at the entire state, that 15.2 put us right around the 27th worst, so well within the bottom 10% of student to teacher ratio, to kind of put Mr. Sawyer's point into a little bit more perspective in terms of the entire state.
I mean, valid point. I mean, our class sizes have been too high, and it's been a problem that's been getting worse instead of better. So, the second priority was technology, which, like staffing, it was a three-pronged problem. The 3 steps were Wi-Fi and infrastructure, getting the proper programming and curriculum, and then device and hardware procurement. That's just a list of the recommendation for new staff we needed from a previous slideshow. The short version of it is that the recommendation was approximately over 20 teachers to bring us back in line with where we need to be. On to technology. Infrastructure really is a need that we can cross out as the school department, with the support of the Attleboro Trust commissioners, was able to initiate a plan to acquire the necessary infrastructure upgrades without the use of municipal funds, which was to the tune of over $200,000 that we were able to, again, through the Attleboro Trust commissioners and through other funds, acquire necessary infrastructure needs without having to go to the city. That still does leave us with programming and curriculum and device procurement. I think, as we've said several times, we run a real danger if we think now that we have Wi-Fi in the buildings, or will have Wi-Fi in the buildings, that our job is done. Because if we're not using that technology and our teachers don't have the proper training to be able to use that technology to bring it to a suitable and beneficial classroom experience, then what have we really done? So it's important that we take that next step, and that's going to require funding. Mr. Geddes?
And again, as a matter of perspective, there are districts in the area that I know have been doing this for at least 10 years already, to show how far behind we are in this.
We are, and I think that's why it's the second priority. When we really tried in December to limit what our priorities were going forward, knowing we were going to be in a tough space and tough place, and technology and continuing the momentum that we started to build in December is crucial. So now that we know level services, what they are and what our priorities are, what does that all mean? Well, the short version is, with the governor's number, it's not a good situation we find ourselves in now. As we look at the chart we looked at before, we're $4 million short of net school spending, and we're over $6 million short of our limited priority list. Numbers that are too high, and that I think we have to be ready to assume we're not going to reach. So how would, if we didn't get to that level servicing number, if that $4 million couldn't be acquired, what are we talking about for potential budget cuts? I don't know, Mr. Furtado, Mr. Sawyer, Mr. Sheehan, if you want to start.
Sure. One of the things that we've discussed is making transportation fees universal. That number would assume about a 10% melt in the ridership, just based on the fact that there were fees. There's a segment of the population, kindergarten students, that by state law we have to transport for free. The rest of the students would pay the current fee for service fee to be eligible to get on a bus. That would yield something in the neighborhood of $600,000. We have a couple of academic coaching positions open. Again, it's been a struggle that the staff has met this year with those open positions, but keeping them open would yield another 150. new leadership in the special education department has been working diligently at assessing our out-of-district placements, and again, it's always a gamble in that regard, because you don't know who's coming in, and you don't know what the summer is going to bring in a child's life and what they're going to bring to school, back to school in September. But again, a gamble of $200,000 in tuition reductions.
Any questions on this?
Just, where are the coaching positions, like, throughout the district? And how exactly with the district tuition is that gonna be accomplished?
The special education tuition piece is really an investment. It's about the middle school program going to extending the network program at the old high school.
Okay.
And looking at middle school age children that we thought that would, depending on how we develop the program, in fact, those children would be qualified to come back into the district, which I think is a good thing for them.
Okay. And then which coaching positions are still open?
I believe that the coaching positions, they can run the gamut. Obviously, we would involve the high school principal and the AD with regard to it, but coaches with regard to ELA and math coaches within the district. That, I believe we have 16 in the district right now, or
Positions, yes.
positions. And so look at reframing those particular positions.
How many are currently filled of the 16?
14.
14 are filled.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment with regard to how difficult these decisions are going to be for not just the administration, but even more so for the committee, because as long as I've been here, the Attleboro School Committee has done an excellent job philosophically with regard to transportation. And that is, and the public should know that, the best way that we get kids into school is to provide busing and to provide transportation. We have an excellent attendance rate for all of our kids K to 12. Without the transportation that we provide, obviously some of it's mandated and some of it's not, but it is the safest way by which we bring our kids into school and bring them home. It's the best way that we ensure that the kids on a rainy day, snowy day, whatever, get on a bus and they come to school. And the parents feel comfortable of doing that. One of the number one reasons why we enjoy the academic success of our students is because of our attendance rate, because they're here to learn. And when in fact that transportation piece that you've embraced since I've known you, when that starts to go backwards, you can expect the attendance also to go backwards in some other pieces. So that's why, people don't realize it's not about providing a free transportation. No, this had a major impact on how well academically the students have done in the Attleboro Public Schools.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, these are all tough cuts, that one, especially in the ones we're gonna get to in a minute, and the potential cuts, I should say. And, the fact is that our level services budget, based on what the governor's put out there, if we don't get more help from the city or the state, we're looking at over a $4 million deficit, and
Gotta cut
there's
somewhere.
no way to get there without making hard cuts. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to have this discussion is so that we all know, and so that the community can know what we're looking at, and we know what the reality of the situation is if we don't make changes. Mr. Storrs?
With the two coaching positions, what schools are missing coaches right now?
Brennan and Thatcher.
So we're talking about not filling those positions at those two schools. Would the other positions be changed so that they would be traveling into those schools, or would those two schools would just not have those additional positions?
So this year, to cover the gap that we had this year, we did not fill those two positions in those two schools. We did not cut the positions. They're still, on the books, but they're just not filled, so we're not paying so there's a savings there. In both cases, due to various moves, that the positions were left open. What's being contemplated here is doing more of that to save another $150,000 at other schools. I mean, all would suggest get rid of all of them.
Does that 150,000 represent getting rid of all of them?
I'm not quite sure how Mark arrived at that number.
No, that would just be not filling the two that are currently open.
The next potential cut is one that for members of the school committee over the last term I know is a tough one to swallow, which would be elimination of all after-school programs at the middle schools. Roughly $160,000.
Yeah, again, a terribly unfortunate circumstance. I think that we are finding the activity and the subscription to the new programs that the school committee approved to be robust. It's very active. You know, the concept of an extended day at the middle school is a very healthy one, and a very positive one for the students, and we're finding it being utilized. This is a pretty crushing outcome.
Yeah, this is really one that hurts me a lot, because I know we've talked about it so many times, and we know the benefit that it has. Would there be a chance of implementing some type of user fee to keep it going still, or like a potential?
I think all options are on the table. When you talk about athletics, you talk about the after-school programs. I think every option is on the table. We know how devastating this can be to our school district. And as Mr. Withers says, I mean, we've got $4 million plus to cut. Yet we're not doing that with cutting paper and crayons. It's
Which
about,
we already did, and we're
we
still.
already did all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and I do think it's important to note that this is all just very, very preliminary possibilities that, you know, as we get closer and we figure out what the number is, and hopefully it's a lot smaller than 4 million, but if it's 4 million or if it's some smaller number, you know, the administration's going to, and they'll back to us, you know, in the nitty gritty of, you know, trying to do this in a way that causes the, you know, the least upheaval to the programs, and if that's, you know, includes hopefully not a complete elimination, but maybe a reduction of the middle school program or something, you know, but this is just, you know, preliminary explanation of if we're where we look to be right now, you know, this could be the reality. Mr. Quinn?
You know, at the risk of beating a dead horse, I wasn't on the committee, I wasn't here for the fight, but as a former middle school teacher, I know how valuable these are to the students' social and emotional growth. The after-school programs may be one of the biggest drivers bringing the kids to school. So now we've got an issue where we make it more challenging for families to get their child to school through the school buses, then we're taking away an incentive for students to stay. I'm sure late buses in terms of getting those students back home at the end of the day. You know, research again and again has shown that, you know, our junior high and middle school students are some of the least connected in the world to their schools, and I think this is one way that we're able to reach them and provide them that interest-driven learning. And I think, you know, moving forward, we're going to have to really think flexibly, get some help from our different state and municipal partners. But this, you know, after all the hard work that was put into this just we need to figure out a way to make this stay on.
Mr. Furtado?
As some of the longer-term committee members know, we not only have a swimming pool, but we have a swimming pool that has tremendous potential to incur serious costs when it has failures. We have we just did an extensive amount of work on the main drain for the pool that went multiples beyond what the expectation was in terms of its cost, and unfortunately did not address the entire filtering system, which is next up and is a multiple of what we've already invested. So, you know, this is as much an issue of cost avoidance as it is, you know, a reduction in the budgetary impact, which is you know, we're in a spot now where we're talking about $50,000 being modest, so that's a scary notion. But this is the cost of the labor for testing the pool, the electricity for running the pool, the chemicals for treating the pool, and those sorts of things. The direct cost of operating the pool.
You want to continue on to the next one?
This is again, we're not. We have not discussed about the elimination of athletic programs, but the budgetary support of athletic programs. This is essentially the cost on the budget for coaching positions, athletic training positions, memberships, supplies, those items for the athletic department.
So you said you were, and we're not discussing the elimination of the athletic programs. Can you give some explanation of how they would be able to?
Well, we currently have a fee program for athletics. Whether or not that gets expanded, if that's tolerable from a participant's perspective, a family's perspective, is not for me to decide certainly. But this would sort of model what happens with your the hockey program to a great degree.
Mr. Storrs?
So, under this concept, the coaches are still paid for by our budget, so we effectively have the ownership of the programs, correct? It's not, it's a one-third split, as I understand the hockey program is.
Yes, we would still own the programs. I'm not sure about the 1/3. I don't think that's accommodated here. This is the on-budget cost of athletics at Attleboro, which is not the budget, which is not the total athletic budget, because they have use of their revolving funds, their transportation funds they're using. It's a much bigger number than that, but that's the on-budget number.
I think what I'm really asking is about the coaches themselves. The salaries of the coaches are integrated into that,
Yes, sir.
but cutting that we can't put that on the parent group, so we're saying that would be coming out of the revolving accounts instead.
Well, we'd have to, again, find ways to make it happen.
I think with this cut, I don't think there's any doubt that this would vastly
Change
change the
program.
athletic programs. And again, that's why we're having this discussion to show what we're looking at here to get to the $4 million number. Because with these numbers, we're still at about
Barely
$1 million.
over $1 million.
A little bit over $1 million. Which brings us to the rest, which would get us to about $4 million, which would be a wage freeze for every employee in the district, including those who just entered into contracts within the past year, which would obviously isn't our call.
It's not at our discretion, no. This would require bargaining with all of the collective bargaining units. Again, for the members who have been here in the prior term and participated in those discussions, that's a very, very significant challenge.
All right, so with all that good news, what are the potential solutions to the problem? There are three things that I think we can do and that we really must do at this point, which is why it's beneficial we're having this conversation today, rather than in late March or April. The first is to reach out to the state delegation. I did reach out to Representative Haro today. I recommend that others reach out to any state reps or state members of the state delegation they know, to express the reality that the budget put forth is untenable for the Attleboro schools. Second is something that I know we've already been doing that we need to continue to do, and that's to look inward and see what we can do to alleviate this problem. We're not immune to an obligation to try and bridge this deficit any way we can. And third, we need to engage the community and we need to engage the municipal government to have discussions about the priorities we place on educational funding at the municipal level. Our schools are funded through the state and through the municipal government, and so while we need to reach out to the state delegation, we certainly need to reach out to the municipal government, and I think one way to do that is to get the community to buy in on the idea that we need to be funding education at a higher level, at the local level. I think it's important before we get into anything else to explain, as we've explained, I think every time we've discussed the budget since I've been on the school committee, that the problem that we find ourselves in is primarily caused by the state government. It's not a coincidence that you hear similar problems from districts in the area. It is the state foundation budget is simply insufficient. The foundation budget set forth by the Commonwealth, I should say the governor's proposed foundation budget, increased by 0.21% for Attleboro, so less than 1/4%. The foundation calculations, which are structurally flawed, result in minimum school spending requirements on the municipality, which are also insufficient to continue to run the district. I mean, it's simply an unsustainable situation with the funding levels provided by the state and the minimum requirements they put on the local government. We can't continue to be here with a multi-million-dollar deficit just to reach level services. So, again, we understand, and it's important that when we talk to people, we let them know that the problem is primarily caused by the state government. No one denies that. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a discussion about whether or not the local government is spending enough on education. And in having that conversation, I think it's important to know what the local government is required to spend and what they do spend on education. The state government sets a foundation budget, which is a number that we're required to receive as a minimum level. They then subtract the state aid they give us, and that gets you the minimum amount that the city can spend on education. That is how our budget is arrived at on a yearly basis. The municipal portion of the school budget this year is going down on the governor's number by $28,000. Over the last several years, it's gone up by $400,000, $657,000. And in fiscal year 14, $1 million. So for some reason, based on the formula that the state uses, they're requiring the municipal government to spend less on a yearly basis. And this is, I think this slide's important when we talk about what the city spends on education locally. Again, while the state funding levels is inadequate, it is, I think, important to understand that the city of Attleboro is spending less than 1% or around 1%, depending on the numbers, above the minimum requirements, while the state average is 30% above the minimum requirements, which admittedly is driven up by some large spenders such as Cambridge and Wellesley and communities like that. But the state median, which is a more reliable number, is 22% above the minimum requirements. Our DART districts, we have 2 other districts that are similar to us, and then you see the rest that are 10%, 59%, 14%, 20%, et cetera, above the minimum requirements, whereas Attleboro continues to spend just above the minimum amount that it's required to spend on a yearly basis. Surrounding districts, there's been talk that the city spends more per pupil than a couple of surrounding districts, which may be accurate, but the fact does remain that when you're looking at what we're required to spend, Attleboro spends less above the requirement on a percentage basis than any of the surrounding districts, and it's by a fairly significant margin. In fiscal year 15, we ranked 9 of 11 among districts in our DART district. We ranked below all of our 5 surrounding districts, and in the 292 districts that reported the data, we were 266 in the state, and our percentage above net school spending. And so we put this slide together to start the discussion of, is this how we want Attleboro to fund education at a local level? And it may be that that's the community's desire, that the money's not there, but my feeling on the school committee, my feeling as a parent, as a business owner, is that community we live in should be funding education at a higher level than we currently are. And I don't think anyone thinks that it's an easy decision or that the money is just there to throw at the schools. It certainly would require hard decisions on a municipal level. But I think now is the time that those hard decisions are needed, and the schools need a larger percentage of the funds.
And I couldn't agree more that as a city, we have to look at those figures, and it's pretty eye-opening, and it's pretty embarrassing to see us rated so low in the way that the schools are valued in our city. It's something that really needs to be looked at citywide.
And then the last slide, and this is just, for discussion purposes, because I know money is tough to come by. There's no doubt about that. It's tough to come by on a personal level. It's tough to come by on a municipal level, for sure. It's tough to come by on any level. But I think there's an argument to be made that there is money there to increase the funding for the schools. I think that the municipal government has done a great job of being conservative and responsible stewards of the city's money. But I think we find ourselves at a point right now where the schools, frankly, as a direct result of what the state looks to be doing this year from a budgeting perspective, find ourselves in dire needs of increased funding and an increased prioritization for other schools. And I think that capability is there. And that's it. Mr. Geddes.
Like I said, I have a lot to say on this. So, I remember being a student at Studley in the 3rd grade and seeing a bumper sticker that said, "Wouldn't it be great if schools were properly funded and the Navy had to hold bake sales to fund themselves?" So education has always been a low priority, and it's very unfortunate. I know you mentioned that you've reached out to Representative Thoreau. I know he shared publicly his budget priorities for the state, and his top priority was related to the Department of Corrections. And I look at education as kind of preventative maintenance. We've got a properly funded education system. We don't have to spend nearly as much on our Department of Corrections. And this is just a very unfortunate situation. From an outsider's perspective, having not been on the previous committee, but watching the budget process from afar, to see that the cities, of all of the city departments, the only ones to take a personnel cuts were the schools, to lose 10 educators, while none of the other departments lost any personnel. The mayor's office added a position, is trying to add another position within their department. I saw in the paper today that the police department is looking for more positions. That's not something I can begrudge them for, because doing so would reduce the overtime costs. So I think, again, if they can save money there, can some of that come to us? I think it's a significant morale issue. I know that there are some staff that I've sat with in meetings, some teachers or administrators, that just think this city does not care about its schools. And this is, again, from an outsider's perspective, last year it just seemed like the schools are on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to priorities for the city. And I say this echoing Mr. Withers' point that this is an issue created by the state and should not fall solely on the shoulders of the city, but it is something that I really hope the city can mitigate as much as possible. The possibility of cutting support to athletics. I mean, during the consent agenda, we voted on a $1,500 donation from Brian Legg to the Attleboro High School baseball program. I don't know if any of you know Brian Legg, but he was a graduate of Attleboro High School that dressed up as the Bombardier in the mid-'80s. That's someone that was dedicated to the schools when he was here. That's someone that carried that dedication graduated over 30 years ago now. To to see the possibility of these types of cuts it's heartbreaking. So I think I'll end it there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just one second, Mr. Tyler, just, I'll piggyback on him and then give you the floor. You know, I think a quote, or a comment made in, the wonderful front page article about our incoming superintendent, Dave Sawyer today. If you haven't read it, you should, where he said that, you know, the state governments essentially, and I'm sorry for horribly misquoting you, so I'll paraphrase. You know, the state government's funding levels is unsustainable, and it's creating a situation where it's pitting school districts and the municipal
Absolutely.
government apart, and that's not what. That's not a good situation. It's not what we're trying to do. Realize that this is, again, caused by the state government and the funding levels. But we need the municipal government's help. And I think to get that, you know, for the municipal government to understand that, they're going to need to hear it from the community. You know, if I'm a municipal councilman or I'm the mayor, you know, it's one thing for the school committee to say it. It's another thing, you know, to understand that, you know, this is a community that's buying into the message that, you know, we're at a point now where we have real needs and that they need to be addressed. So, Mr. Tyler?
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'm just thinking that, you know, Governor Baker's favorable poll just took a big hit in this room. I'm a Republican. But anyway, but then, getting serious, a 2.1% increase, it's just ridiculous. You know, I think the tax gate's coming in right now like 4%, what they're saying in the paper, above and beyond. So, I agree with both of you, but we have to get Representative Haro and we have to get Senator Timley on this thing to see that Attleboro was being grossly mistreated here. Everything that was brought up in that presentation about a deficit is something that I've been working on since I got back on this committee in 2008 to rebuild. And now they say everything they want to take it away, plus some. There's no way we can continue that. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but it's a state answer. It's not our municipal government that has been doing it to us. They've been kind of helping us out in every way they can. We really have to get Representative Haro and Senator Timley on this about proving to them that this is not acceptable for Attleboro.
Mr. Larson and Mr. Geddes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to echo some of Mike's points, I mean, I think until we can find a sustainable path forward, because I think, you know, kind of going back to one of the presentations earlier in the evening, and going through some of the capital improvement presentations over the last few years, you know, there's the budget that we get from the city, and then, I mean, I can remember being with Mr. Furtado at one of the presentations, and capital improvement a few years ago, we got, of the $12 million or so that the city spent, I think almost $8 million of it was spent on projects at the school. So, I mean, I get a little concerned about us saying that the city's not supporting, you know, that's education spending. I mean, making sure that we have the envelope to have the kids inside. I mean, if you don't have the envelope, it doesn't matter what you're spending per kid. So, you know, I think, you know, listening to, you know, the presentation earlier tonight, I mean, there's $2 or $3 million there that really needs to get spent soon. Somebody needs to find that money. We're within, I'm gonna say 12 to 24 months of spending a lot of money in this building, and we don't have a lot of money, so we're gonna have to ask other people for that money. And so I think we just need to be conscious of, we need help, obviously, but we're also getting a lot of help in other parts of, you know, the building, renovating the high school, and, you know, a number of these other projects that we have. And, you know, until there is a sustainable path for just education to be funded, you know, we're gonna keep bumping up against this. And I agree. I mean, the formula doesn't work anymore. You know, it's outdated, hasn't been corrected, hasn't been adjusted. So I think we need to be a little cautious of both sides of, because we're gonna have both hands out, so.
Mr. Storrs?
Yeah, to piggyback, you know, this isn't a blame game. We're not, I don't think we're pointing across the city at anybody and saying that it's their fault. I mean, if anywhere, we got to point up a little bit north of where we are. This is absolutely unsustainable. Last year, it was painful with all the things that we wanted to do and all the improvements we wanted to make and what we had to have, and to sit there meeting after meeting and just have to slash and cut and cut and cut. That was painful. But at least we were able to keep going forward and do some things that were positive. This is way worse than what last year was, by far. I remember back in 2010, we had the same sort of thing, and that was $2.5 million shortfall. And it was a little bit of a nightmare. You know, to go to certain people, certain groups, and ask them to give up certain things, it was, you know, it turned into a little bit of a circus, and it was bad for months. And it almost seems like that's where we're heading right now. And if that is where we're ending up going, it's just not going to be pretty over the next couple of months. So.
And I agree with everything that that you gentlemen have said. I think even if the support that we get from the city is Mayor Dumas throwing all of his weight behind us reaching out to the state at multiple levels, whether it's directly to the governor's office, Senator Timilty, Senator Ross, Representatives Hero and Poirier, any support we can get. I don't mean to by any means sound ungrateful. I know when the mayor pushed for the meal tax a couple of years ago as a result of the initial significant budget shortfall, he said it was because he wanted to do everything in his power to keep the Attleboro schools vibrant and successful. So I don't doubt his dedication to the schools, and I'm fine with them saying the financial support would be a last resort if the state isn't able to do anything for us. But we need support in a bad way.
Yeah, and there's a difference between placing the blame on the city and telling the city we need your help and we think you have the capacity to help in some way. You know, I think that's two very different things. I think those messages get jumbled sometimes, and I think, but it should be very clear. We're not placing the blame on the city. We're just telling them we need your help, and you know, we think that you know that you can help us out.
A lot of great points have already been raised. And I think the way that I'm looking at this is that it's going to require flexible thinking on a lot of different fronts. It's going to require flexible thinking from the school committee in terms of how to meet these gaps in innovative ways. It's going to require a lot of the ideas from the great staff that we have in terms of how do we become more efficient, how do we kind of change the way we look at education. It's going to take some flexible thinking from our state delegation, our municipal side. You know, there's often the refrain that we need to live within our means, but we also need to think about if we're so far behind, how can we change our means? And that may mean, you know, advocating for an economic development director at the mayor's side, because we need to grow the base. But where we are is just simply unacceptable, and we need to change it. And just being in kind of a reactive mode is not going to get us to where we need to go, because we're only thinking, you know, 1 year ahead from year to year. We just set a strategic plan that sets up the next 5 years. Some of these goals are not going to require additional funding. Some of them are, but I think we need to try to keep that as our kind of our North Star as we're making our decisions moving forward. And again, just trying to think as flexibly as possible about how to meet these needs, and reach out to resources that we may not have thought of before.
Anyone else? Mr. Stores.
With this level of gap, I'm sure you guys have looked at what kind of FTEs, full-time positions, are we really looking at here?
Well, it's a good question. You've already eaten 20 of them in the last few years.
Right.
You have class sizes that are totally unacceptable across the board. We do not have the level of people retiring. They just aren't there, so we have to replace them. The reality is that we have to put a teacher in front of an average of 25-plus children. And there is no more consolidation. You know, as you were talking before, and Dave was talking about, one of the first things that we've done in the last couple of years is we've consolidated class across the district. There's no longer a neighborhood school any longer. We have children who are going and being bused across the district because there's a slot over there for them. And we couldn't create another classroom per se. So the reality is, there's no consolidations. There are none of those pieces. Those are full-time equivalents. Unless you're cutting an entire program, that's how you get a particular staff member. The difference is, though, those 125 kids that that person may have, they have to go somewhere. And so you're adding those kids to already class sizes that are unacceptable. So we do this. We've been doing this since end of November. And we've explored all of these potentials and possibilities and beyond all of that, as we shared during the vacation week.
Right, and in the condition we're in, if we were to say that the reductions would have to come from people, you know, this is a 700 employee enterprise, you'd be talking about 20% of that staff. In a condition that we're in now where we don't have enough to meet class size needs and services the student needs.
And
It's just impossible.
yeah, I mean, if you cut that many, and the class sizes that we create won't fit in the classes we have. So, you know, it becomes really like a logistical problem aside from all the other concerns.
I think, and part of the problem, I mean, these numbers would be problematic anyway, but after the past couple of years, we simply can't cut more FTEs. I mean, we can't, you know, I mean, cutting positions and cutting people is always a terrible decision and a tough decision no matter what, but I mean, this is a year where we find ourselves in where it's not a realistic option for a successful school system. Mr. Larson? Okay. Mr. Quinn?
I just want to reiterate one more point that was made earlier about the importance of community outreach and the community support here. I think you all know where we stand in terms of the priority for education, but I think that unless the members of the community are willing to speak up both with their ideas about how to solve it and what they would like to see in terms of budget priorities, the status quo remains the same. So now, you know, more than ever is a critical time for members of the community to really, you know, make their voices heard in terms of what their priorities are. You know, not just for this year, but what the direction for the city is moving forward.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, I just wanted to state, I definitely agree with all these points that are being made, but I just want to reiterate what Mr. Quinn just said about how important the community involvement is going to be in moving forward, prioritizing those budgets, and definitely encourage folks to reach out to their state representatives. And I think it's going to be huge moving forward. So I just want to reiterate that point.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, we changed our policy to start these discussions earlier, with maybe the hope the discussions wouldn't be as somber as they are today. But you know, that being said, as somber as this discussion is, I hope that by starting it this early and having already discussed it in the past, we've been able to discuss it in a way where we're thinking of ideas to make the problem better. We're not blaming. We're not sending blame across the city. I hope that's been clear, but we're looking for solutions, and we're going to continue to look for solutions, because we've done a lot of good work with the people we have here, great work, and that's going to continue. We just have to figure out how that's going to be done. So, with that being said, I think we can move on from that and move on to labor contracts.
Mr. Chairman, this is just a sort of a heads up. Unfortunately, because of the duration of the last cycle, we're actually ready to start a new one. So, one of the things that would be necessary is for the committee to consider the creation of subcommittees to be assigned to specific labor negotiations for the committee to also deliberate how they want those discussions to take place. Historically, for context for the new folks, we have legal representation in our discussions with the AEA. We typically do not with the other unions. Historically, we have not necessarily had an extensive team at the formal meetings with the other unions. With the AEA we have. So in the context of the budget discussion, forming the committees sooner rather than later would be advisable because, as was pointed out, we may be getting into talks sooner than we expected.
Okay. I'll be looking into that over the next week and be updating the committee and you, Mr. Furtado. Administrative vacancies.
Yes, so I wanted to give the committee an update. We have, well, 4 vacancies, one that,
Why don't we start with the happy one?
yeah, we can take care of this evening. I've submitted for approval by the school committee a contract to bring on our next assistant superintendent.
Everyone has received a copy of the proposed contract. Over the weekend, I had a chance to review it. At this point, I'd be looking for a motion to authorize the execution of that contract.
So, second.
Have any discussion? Anyone? Well, I'll speak since again, it's nice to have something positive to talk about. I'm excited for Ms. Regan to be joining us. I think it's going to be a positive step for the district, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you for both of us. It's
Once we vote, I should say.
I've been very encouraged by how many of you have already commented on how positive your interactions have been with Ms. Regan. I know that in my absence, she's really already stepped up and begun her work in transitioning in and helped us through some of the things that were difficult as a result of my not being here for a little bit. I can't say enough about what she brings to the table in terms of both her skill set and her experience, and it's going to be, I think, a really fantastic partnership for the two of us to work together to bring the district as far as we can.
And I can just say that when this term started and Mr. Sawyer was out for a while, Ms. Regan was invaluable to me in helping bringing me up to speed with some things that were going on and helping with some presentations at the meeting. So I'm grateful to her for that. And I think they were presentations that were valuable to the committee members as well. All right, if there's no other comments, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn, yes. Mr. Quinn, yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
You can vote for yourself. Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
All right. And so that passes 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 other anticipated vacancies. Well, 1 current vacancy with an interim in place, and then 2 anticipated vacancies. The first is the CTE director. Ms. Edmonds has announced her intent to retire. We did post for that position back on February 3rd, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware. I'll be working with the high school administration in the next week to develop the process by which we will go out and do our best to find a capable replacement for Ms. Edmonds. The next,
Ms. Scales?
yes.
I just want to thank her. I don't think we've had a chance yet. Thank her for her dedication to the school system and the wonderful work that she's done in moving the CTE program forward. She'll be sorely missed.
Yes, I imagine that sometime between now and the end of this school year, there'll be a reason why CTE is presenting before you, so we'll get a chance to recognize her at that time and thank her for her service, because she certainly has done a very capable job. The next one is Hill Roberts. We did receive a resignation from Mr. Johnson. He's going off to Sudbury. So we will need to find a replacement for Hill Roberts. Before you is the posting that we plan to use later this week. We would like to get this posted and begin that process as quickly as possible. In some of our administrative positions in the past, we've waited for various reasons too long to get into it, and the real push for finding replacements is this time of year, as evidenced by his departure. So we'd really like to get this process going. Ms. Regan will be chairing that committee. We'll be putting together a committee of representative stakeholders from the Hill Roberts community, and they will do a search process which will produce recommendations for finalists, who will then meet with Mr. Sheehan and myself, and we will work together to pick the eventual recommendation that we'll bring back for the school committee.
And for the committee's information, I did ask Mr. Storrs to be the school committee's representative on that committee, and he's agreed to do so. So thank you, Mr. Storrs, for that.
Which we appreciate. Thank you.
Okay.
So if there are no concerns or questions about that,
Any other questions on any questions on that process?
so then the last one is the Director of Special Education. We will have a vacancy come July 1st that we need to address. As you well know, the Director of Special Education is a position that is approved by the school committee, like the Assistant Superintendent, but unlike other administrative positions. So, one, I've provided for you a proposed posting so that we could get this process underway. But also this evening, we really need to decide whether or not the school committee, as is its right, wants to run its own process for this search, or whether you wish to direct the administration to conduct the search on your behalf.
Well, first, I think we need approval of the posting, correct? Or do we not need an approval? Of
Well, it
the
depends
posting?
on which
Okay.
way you go with the
Okay.
second decision,
Right.
I would
All right.
guess.
Well, I mean, does anyone on the committee have strong feelings anyway on this as to how we proceed? What's that?
I was just saying, I mean, from your, knowing this position and knowing the students, what would you recommend?
So,
To put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
yeah, thanks. Can you explain the difference between the two?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
If the school committee conducts its own search, it is my understanding that such a search would be subject to all the open meeting laws. And so, while many of those meetings would be called to order and then brought into executive session because of the sensitivity of what's going on, that wherever you can't make the argument that that has to be done in executive session, everything else has to be done in open meetings, and that you have to post it. And so there are just some procedural requirements that complicate it. If you keep the process yourself, you would decide who's on the committee, you would decide how to conduct it and what particular procedures to use. If you direct the administration to do it, we would have a little bit more freedom to not follow open meeting law, to go about the way we normally do our searches. And then we would have whatever freedom you grant us in terms of how to conduct the search. You can set whatever parameters you want in directing us to conduct the search.
And you would still have school committee representation on the search committee in that case.
Again, it would be at your
Yeah.
direction, so.
Right. Mr. Larson.
My personal feeling, if you're asking for opinions, I'd like to see the administration do the search with up to 2 people from the school committee as part of the interview process.
Mr. Tyler?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Usually in positions like this, when you talk to some of the top administrators, people don't want their name to be associated with the search until they're one of the finalists. And you can only have that if it's done behind closed doors. If not, the process is too open for a position like this where frankly, it scares some people away.
I think we've had that experience.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a motion to direct the administration to run the search for a new for a special ed director with representatives, up to 2 representatives from the school committee that I will appoint to the search committee.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, and then we would have some sort of oversight over the process beyond, you know.
Yeah, in the end, it's
Yeah.
approved by the school committee.
Okay,
That's by law.
okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So I guess we don't need to approve the job description, so that's.
So then I have provided the job description, so if you have, anyone has any feedback, certainly this would be a good time to share it.
Ms.
Just-
Gales?
Just 2 things as I'm
Sure.
reading it. We always refer to ourselves as a pre-K to 12+ district.
Very true.
And right after that, just a wording, where it says 5 to 21 with special needs, special education needs.
What is meant by 3 years administrative experience?
3 years of experience as an administrator.
Right, but are we,
As opposed to someone who's coming right out of the classroom.
okay, so if you were the school director of special education or,
Yeah, so by using that term, we're giving ourselves a lot of
Latitude.
flexibility
Okay.
to interpret, what we mean by that. But we're trying to send the message, if you don't have administrative experience, if you're still working in a classroom,
Okay.
you probably don't have the experience needed to take this particular position. Okay.
I'm sorry, and just further down, again, to be consistent, record of leadership with special education needs, please.
Yes.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right.
I appreciate the feedback, and we will be posting this, I imagine, I have it here as potentially the 29th,
All right.
certainly within the week.
All right, and then I'll be in touch with representatives from the school committee to join the search committee.
Sounds good, and I will keep the committee informed as to what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yep. And I believe you're next again. District calendars.
Yes. All right, so I have 2 things that are related. One, we have, for a while now, been operating in a sort of a calendar void, where we have not had appropriate future calendars planned, so that, we could get ahead of the calendar game and be able to tell people well in advance what to expect. And one of the things that has complicated our ability to get ahead of this is that the contract traditionally has had a provision saying school cannot start before September 1st. And it has been one of the goals of the district to try to start school as early as possible. So through the lab, we've been trying to work on an agreement about how we would construct a calendar, given that in every year, where September 1st falls really changes, the nature of the whole calendar. So again, historically, in years where September 1st was, there was September days before Labor Day, right? There was always the great conundrum of whether or not to start school before Labor Day or not. And then, there were years where we didn't, and that led, to having school ending deep in June, and then everyone, biting their knuckles that we're not going to have any snow days. So trying to get away from that, regardless of where September 1st falls, regardless of where Labor Day falls, how would we approach constructing the calendar consistently so that without necessarily there even being an approved calendar yet, everyone would know what to expect. We've gotten away from people knowing what to expect. It's really what the problem is. So the lab has produced what I've provided for you tonight, that what I've called a logic, right? A calendar logic. So you follow the logic, you come up with a calendar, not even knowing necessarily what the approved is. And then from that, I have provided with you a proposed calendar for next school year that the lab is advocating for as a result of their proposed logic. This calendar is very similar to the calendar we last looked at in June as part of the ratification of the AEA contract. The one adjustment is that the one adjustment from that calendar to this calendar is that the lab is proposing that there be a day off between the second professional development day, which is, so the school year starts with 2 PD days. The first day is, it's not, we call them PD days, but the first day is not really a PD day. It's the opening. It's where we have all the meetings. It's where we have to go do the policy reviews. It's a lot of opening activities that do not count as professional development, but are absolutely required to start the school year. That's the first day. The second day is actually now, this year was a professional development day. And it was as a result of our experience this year. So unlike any other year, we put that PD day at the beginning of the school year this year. Because of the way the calendar fell this year, I believe those days were Wednesday and Thursday of the week before school started. So then there was Friday was no school, so school didn't start yet, but it was also no professional development day or anything like that. It was literally a pause in the action before we then started school the next week. Upon reflection, the internal consensus is that this school year was the smoothest opening in terms of the academic setting that we've ever had. The teachers felt very strongly, to their surprise, that the way we did things led to a smooth opening, because for the first time there was a little bit of time between what those opening activities and actually seeing kids. So rather than what we used to do, which was you have this crush of a day on that first day with all the opening activities, and then kids are in front of you the next day, having the PD day for us to go over some of the instructional priorities that we want them to be implementing over the course of the year, and then giving them that extra day to reflect, to prepare themselves, if they so choose to go in and set up their classrooms, but otherwise to just mentally get themselves ready for school, they felt like actually had a positive impact, which is why they are proposing that change here tonight.
In looking at your logic, number 6 says last scheduled day for students will be no later than June 15th. On the proposed calendar, you have it as June 22nd.
Okay,
Assuming
this is a favorite of mine.
And only you can
Yeah.
explain it.
I will try. The state regulations require that we schedule a 185-day school year,
right.
with the understanding that 5 days would be potential snow days.
Okay.
So what we're required to do is to call the last day the 185th day, even though it's all with a wink, because we know that without any snow days, it's the 180th school day is 5 days before that. And one of the benefits to that is that the way we were doing it before, which again was in violation of regulation, when we tell people the earlier date, everyone schedules their vacation the next week.
Yep.
So then when we have a couple snow days, we have all kinds of problems where people said, you said the last day was, well, whatever the day was, I scheduled my vacation. So now by putting the 5 days in, that helps us to mitigate that problem and get in compliance. But so while we list it as, in this
22nd.
case, the 22nd, it's really,
1 week before that.
Mrs. Storrs?
You look in the calendar, it looks very much like this year, so I like it a lot. The only real thing that stood out to me is the Professional Development Day in June. That's different than this year, right?
we have that this year for the first time.
Okay.
We haven't lived it, so
Right.
that's one thing that, perhaps we'll be back here saying, unlike the start, which everyone loved, perhaps that one doesn't go as well, we'll have to rethink it, but we haven't lived through it yet, so there's no, the jury's out.
Yep, leave it at that, yep.
Mr. Quinn?
First of all, if you wouldn't mind, I'd be interested in the student take on, coming back in late August. What was kind of the student reaction to this calendar?
Initially, kids were a little upset that we were coming back
Sure.
earlier.
Sure.
But as the school year started and went smoothly, like you've said, we realized with like all the snow days and stuff, once that logic hit us outside of our summer atmosphere per se, a lot of kids actually like agreed with it, and they liked how we started earlier because we could potentially get out earlier or whatever, and the snow days wouldn't have as much of a negative effect.
Well, students didn't come back until September 2nd, was it, this year? Or last year? It wasn't in August. I think teachers came back in August, but
It
the
was in
students
September.
came back in September.
And then secondly, with that last kind of professional development day, was there any thought given to maybe having it on election day, considering we've got a presidential election coming up this year?
Moving forward, if there were reasons to rethink any of the days, we certainly could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I did talk to the election commission, and they have committed to St. Teresa's for March and November of this
Okay.
year.
Okay, so that's
Mr. Larson?
Just to your point, the students did start in September, but they did start before
Before
Labor
Labor
Day.
Day, right.
Because Labor Day was so late.
Yeah.
still changes, right?
And as far as the PD day at the end of June, ironically, it was a lot of the members of the lab that really thought that was gonna be a big benefit. Granted, nobody's lived through it yet, so we'll have to kind of wait and see on that, but I think there was a lot of support shown at the lab meetings for that. And I have to reiterate, because I go to a lot of their meetings, there's a lot of passion, believe it or not, that gets put into a lot of the discussions behind some of these thoughts. And the fact that the 10 of them around the table can get together and really come together, and it's a group of people that, from across the entire district, and they never have to take a vote. It's kind of interesting. They all just agree. So from that point, it's very fascinating from that point of view, that I've been going to their meetings for the last 2 years, and I've never seen them take a vote, but they get a lot of work done. So I give them a lot of credit for that, because they find a way to come to an agreement that all 10 of them can live with, and that they all feel that everybody involved can support. So it's really fascinating to watch.
Mrs. Storrs?
I know this year, you went out of the way to present a calendar that tried to put the certain days off or certain half-day PD days towards the weekend, to create 3 or 4 day weekends along with other holidays. Are we maintaining that? Because that's
Yes.
been met with a lot of positive when I.
Did I not include that? in the-
No, I'm sure you
No,
did.
it's
I
fine.
just didn't go to the level of scrutiny.
It
Number
is.
4.
It doesn't say the day in the list, so.
Yep.
Yeah, so the number 4,
Yep.
earliest days, the third Friday, September, then it's before Columbus Day, before MLK Jr., before President's Day, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? So do you need anything from us on this now? The teachers have to approve it as well, correct?
They claim that they don't. They claim that the provision in the contract for this year allows for this calendar without modification.
Okay.
So I would like an approval for the calendar that's being presented. I think there'll be time to, perhaps get behind the logic and time as we work it out. But I wanted to show you the reasoning, and we will use this to actually produce the next set of calendars, which I'll bring forward in the next couple of months. But it would be nice to get an approval of this, the 16-17 calendar, so we could put it out there. I'll also, with approval of this, go out and fill in as many of these unknown dates from the various levels. We can sort that out once we are confident that this is the actual calendar.
Can I have a motion to approve the proposed 2016-2017 district calendar?
Motion to approve the 2016-2017 district calendar as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on our business agenda is our Finance and Budget Subcommittee report. Mr. Larson?
I'll do my best to keep this brief. Finance Committee met February 3rd. We reviewed the monthly financial reports with Mr. Furtado. Thankfully, so far, we've been having a relatively warmer winter up until a week ago. And our snow hasn't mirrored anything close to last year, so that will certainly help because we have some other challenges that we're monitoring throughout the budget. We do have one motion to bring forward as a transfer. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $1,424.61 from the SPED field trips contracted line for $1,000 into SPED testing supplies and $424.61 to SPED Psych Consult contractor line. This was approved at the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I know you had one of the papers that came in your packet over the weekend, and then the other is on the table here for you tonight, if there's any additional questions. All that, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved, 8-0. All right. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Now move on to our open forum. This is a time when members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for committee members to engage in a dialogue with members of the public. Guidelines for open forum are available to you. Please know that we are interested in what you have to say, but we cannot respond without background information on the issue. Is there anyone here that would like to address the school committee in open forum? No? All right, that closes open forum. This time, I'd entertain a motion to enter executive session as pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3. The school committee will convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategies with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, as an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the school committee. The school committee will not reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Ms. Scales?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
All right, we will take a 3 to 5 minute recess and be back in executive session.